Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today, I'm going to be doing a short video essay on the film Spirited Away for my philosophy of anime class. And I'm going to be focusing on the use of Shintoism within Spirited Away and the way in which the film explores some of the core concepts of Shintoism, and for all of you teachers out there, how the film can be used to understand Shintoism. Now, Shintoism is a traditional Japanese religion, is the traditional Japanese religion, what we would call the indigenous religion of Japan. And within the first 5 opening minutes of the film, we already get an indication that Shintoism is going to play a large role, at least thematically. The scene that opens up the film that we just played is Chihiro and her family on the way to their new house, passing by this shrine that's propped up on this large tree depicted here. This is a Torii shrine, and it's a traditional shrine of Shintoism. And as they drive by, Chihiro sees the small little houses and asks her mother, "What are those?" And her mother informs her that those are what some people say where spirits live. This is going to introduce Shintoism, Shinto concepts, and it's also going to introduce this dichotomy between Chihiro and her family and this struggle throughout the film, this tension between new modern ways of life represented by the modern family driving the car and the older sort of traditional values represented here by the spirits, the shrine, and Shintoism generally speaking. And oddly enough, what the film's going to do with that tension is kind of flip our expectations on its head, because traditionally speaking, when we think of preserving kind of traditional cultural values, that's usually done by the parents. But of course, in this film, it's going to be Chihiro that is exploring those traditional values, and then over the course of the film, learning to love and appreciate those values and learn life lessons from those. This scene is setting up Chihiro and her family's transition to the spirit world. And this film will highlight 2 very important characteristics of Shintoism that are crucial to understanding Shintoism as a whole. And first and foremost is the existence of the spirit realm and the relationship of the spirit realm to the natural realm. Shintoism, like other indigenous religions, is not going to present the dichotomy that's evident in, let's say, for example, the 3 major monotheistic traditions of the West: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, in which you have God, the creator, who is set over and against God's creation. God is the substance or the cause or the ultimate source of creation, but God is in no way, shape, or form dependent upon God's creation. God is ontologically separate, distinct from creation. But Shintoism, like other indigenous religions, is going to blur that distinction and is going to draw attention to the fact that there is no concrete or ontological separation between what we would call the spirit world and the natural world. In fact, the 2 are intimately and closely related. And this presents us with a form of animism, we could say, in which natural objects are endowed or imbued with spirits. This will come up prominently when Chihiro enters the bathhouse of the spirit world and encounters all of these different spirits that are spirits of particular things. My favorite example of this being the radish spirit depicted here. I identify with the radish spirit on an existential level. The radish spirit, of course, being the spirit of radishes. Generally speaking, we also see this in the various frog spirits that occupy the film. Within Shintoism, the identification of a spirit with a particular entity or object, these spirits are often referred to as kamis. And kamis are kind of seen as the individual manifestation of the force of nature. So again, we have this classic dichotomy in the monotheistic traditions between spirit and nature, or between the divine and nature. Shintoism is going to present us with a worldview in which those 2 things are intimately connected with each other, to the extent that the natural world is endowed with spirit, with the divine. And to the extent that, for example, particular mountains, rivers, lakes, forest will have their own individually represented spirits. So there will be a kami of the mountain, or a kami of the bathhouse, or a kami of the forest. Kamis oftentimes represent individual manifestations of forces of nature, and nature within Shintoism can be understood as a comprehensive whole, which includes humans, inanimate objects such as rocks, rivers, lakes, stream, forest, as well as all of the other living creatures and entities in the world. You have a very similar concept here related to Taoism. In Taoism, the notion of the Tao, or the way, is kind of understood as this universal force which permeates both the natural and the supernatural world. In Shintoism, this force can be understood as the whole of life, life being, again, both animated objects and inanimate objects, both objects that are alive, such as humans, and objects that are not alive, such as rocks, are inundated with this force. And this force is understood to be generative, it's understood to be creative, and it's kind of understood within the larger context of this grand picture of this grand sort of creative force that's moving life, that's moving nature, and that's moving the universe along. And kamis are representations of that force personified in oftentimes sacred spaces, sacred mountains, sacred forest, sacred rivers. But kamis can also, you can also have like a kami of the bathhouse, kamis of particular families. There's like a kami of hair. There's a kami of dress. There's a kami of everything, even things that we wouldn't necessarily think there would be. And we see this notion of the kami being associated with particular objects or places represented later on in the film, where the true identity of Haku is revealed. So here Chihiro remembers a scene from her childhood in which she was swimming in the Kohaku River, almost drowned, and then was saved. And this memory is sparked by her riding on the back of Haku, and it's there that she realized that Haku is the kami of the Kohaku River. Haku is now, of course, in the spirit world, because we learn in the film that the Kohaku River was basically blocked up and dried out to be replaced by some housing, I believe it was. This is just one example of many examples that we see throughout Spirited Away of kami and the relationship that these spirits have to objects and places within the natural world. Another important concept within Shintoism that we see clearly represented in the film is this idea of purity and this idea of ritual cleansing. Purity and ritual cleansing are some essential rituals that feature very heavily in Shintoism. A person is to purify themselves or cleanse themselves when they enter a temple. Houses are purified and cleansed, and even sporting events, such as the ceremony that's performed before sumo matches, often involved a ritual cleansing. Now, there's a very important scene in the film that I think exemplifies this. The scene that I think shows this most clearly is Chihiro's encounter with the, I think they call it the stink spirit. To understand this concept of purity within Shintoism, we have a strong comparison that's being drawn, an analogy between the corruption and the necessary purification of nature, and the corruption and the necessary purification of the human being. So in Shintoism, nature can be corrupted or become impure in the same way that humans can. And the way that nature becomes corrupted or impure, the example as seen in the example here, is through pollution. So here we have a water spirit, a good, clean, pure water spirit that has turned into this repulsive, stinky spirit because it has ultimately become corrupted. It's become corrupted through pollution. Pollution is a corruption of nature because it's not what nature is intended to be. It's unnatural in the sense that pollution has the ability to harm nature, to disrupt nature, and as a result, to harm and disrupt the natural flow and the natural harmony of things. Things like trash, all of these pieces of metal, bicycles, garbage don't belong in things like rivers and lakes. And when those objects are present in rivers or lakes, it has the tendency to not only ruin the lake itself or the river itself, but everything that lives in the river. Within Shintoism, the same can be true of human being. The analogy to pollution, instead of the polluting objects themselves, we can include things like anger or hatred or greed. These are tendencies that the human being possess, which, if left unchecked, can consume or take over the person. And so, how do we cleanse nature? We cleanse nature by cleaning up the pollution. How does the human being cleanse themselves? They cleanse themselves through cleaning up these negative habits or these negative attitudes that we might have. And throughout Shintoism, we have various rituals that are supposed to symbolically represent this purification process. And this is why purification plays such a critical role within Shintoism, is because it's supposed to be symbolic of the necessary order and maintaining of that whole, and human beings are part of that whole. And speaking of purification and the general themes of the film, purification plays a central part in the overarching message of Chihiro's sort of coming of age, because a part of her coming of age story is a sort of purification, a cleansing of who she was at the start of the film. You can see at the start of the film with her interaction with her parents, her hesitancy to go through the tunnel, to enter the spirit realm. She could be perceived as stubborn, as unwilling, as not willing to kind of take in this trip that she's having with her family. And the purification or the cleansing comes through the lessons that she learns and how she grows throughout the film, specifically the critical message of her learning how to love and her learning how to act independently of and also to care for her parents. So, as you could see, several different ways in which Shintoism makes an appearance. There are many more throughout the film, specifically with the different sights and sounds, the representations of different spirits. But I just wanted to cover a few to kind of give you a somewhat of an understanding of how this film could be viewed through a Shinto lens. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all next time.